Because I don't know a lot of your background story either.
Sure.
Share a little bit about how you got to where you are and why this is so important to you.
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick sort of elevator speech.
Yeah.
So really, everything kind of started for me to begin right before the pandemic kicked off. And 18 years in law enforcement, I work for the Canada Border Services Agency. I've been there for 18 years. Uh, I've had my mental health struggles throughout my life, but really, I didn't know I had any struggles until the pandemic
Mm.
started really creeping in. And right before the pandemic happened, I was going through some marriage issues, separation, divorce, and that got gave me an opportunity to take my own inventory, so to speak. I was uh, I was the squeaky wheel in the marriage. I wasn't really, if I were to look back on how I was, I wasn't my best self. I wasn't a good husband, and I wasn't a really good partner. And for me, that was because I thought I was.
Mm.
In my own head and my own ego, I thought, oh, I'm doing this, that, and the other, whatever, right? And I thought I was, and but most definitely I was not, and that didn't feel good for me. So long story short, separation, divorce, living in a basement suite, almost starting all over again, like hitting
Yeah.
a bit of a rock bottom and trying to figure out, okay, listen, I don't like what I've done here with my life, and I want to figure out how to do life better. And so I kind of started on that journey, right? Started reading some books. And I wasn't an avid reader, to be honest, even before that. I became one now, but the first book I picked up to really help out was Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership.
Mhm.
And I read that book cover to cover. And as soon as I read that book, I started trying to take ownership for all my sort of well, owning my responsibilities in life, right?
Right. Right.
And so through that process, and mind you, I'm struggling quite a bit. My mental health wasn't so good at this time, and my depression and anxiety was really like on another level, so to speak. And now the pandemic kicks in, you can't work out. And I used to bodybuild and jujitsu, avid, um, training for the last 5 years in jujitsu, and I used to train almost every day. And for me, that was a connection piece with people. And when I would go to jujitsu, if anyone who's listening to this understands anything about depression, man, if you're isolated and alone, it's not a good
Right.
thing.
Right.
So the pandemic took jujitsu away from me as well. And that when that happened, that was really a major blow for me. I broke down and really didn't know what to do. So then I picked up another book, "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins,
Mhm.
and I read the first two chapters. I still haven't finished the book, full disclosure. I read the first two chapters, and they spoke to me, it resonated with me. Just his life experiences and whatnot. And so for me, I wasn't a runner. I'm 45, and I hadn't ran since high school, and I started running at the beginning of the pandemic, so maybe like 2 years ago. And I uh I'm I kind of go all in when I do things. So I picked up a couple. I had my old sort of 10-year-old pair of shoes on,
Yeah.
and I just was like, okay, hey man, let me get out there, let me start running a little bit. Because the underlying theme of Goggins' book, at least the one that I interpreted at that time, was do hard things, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I interpret the book or that sort of meaning much differently now, but at that time I took it to mean physically. And so I started running and scheduled myself 3 5Ks a week. And I mean, for me, I had no frame of reference, right? Like I didn't know, I didn't know what was good, what was bad, nothing, because I didn't really run ever. And at that time, I was really getting a bit more isolated. I was still working and everything, but so most of my friends for the last 18 years, we just kind of started just growing apart.
Mhm.
And so I just started running, and I did that. And after about a couple months, I was like, okay, man, let me see if I can push myself. So I went out one night. I had a real bad day that day, actually. So mind you, I was living in the basement suite of the house my ex-wife and I bought together. So we lived
Okay.
in. So I had moved in the basement suite. So during the pandemic, if people were renting, they couldn't squat and not pay. So my ex-wife and I, we came to an agreement where I would move into the basement suite, pay rent and all that kind of stuff, and then I could still see my daughter on a regular basis, and
Mhm.
it would help her and it would help me. But realistically, it wasn't really good for either one of us mental health wise. But we made the best of it. So, anyways, so I had a bad day that day. I wasn't feeling really good, and
Yeah.
I was in my head, and my anxiety was like really, really high, and I was like, man, I got to do something here. And so I just went out for a run,
Mm.
and it was out of schedule. It wasn't part of my schedule to do it, and it's like whatever, man. And I ran 21K,
Okay.
and yeah, I just yeah, I went out and I was like, going, and felt, I had never done that ever. Like I've never pushed myself to that degree without any sort of motivating factor trying to do it. Like,
Mm.
when I would compete in jujitsu, go and compete in a tournament and get a medal, or with bodybuilding, you're dieting, you go to an event and get a trophy or not, whatever, right? But this was just like more of an internal thing. I can't explain it. I just kind of went, and it wasn't pretty. I mean, it didn't take. I wasn't fast. I just did it, and for me, that kind of gave me hmm, made me feel good about myself.
Right.
So yeah, and so when that happened, I was sore for a bit, but then I continued on that path, and I was like, okay, well, let's keep doing this, and I kept running, and let's say 2021 in February, in and around that time, I wanted to really test myself because I hit a plateau, so to speak, and I was like, I listened to Cam Haines quite a bit on Joe Rogan's podcast and people like that, and I've heard him a bunch of times on that podcast, and he's in his 50s and he's an ultra marathoner, and when he's gearing up for a 100 miler or a 200 miler, he's running a marathon a day for training, and I was like, man, that's amazing. How does he do that? He's in his 50s. I want to be able to do that,
Yeah.
right? Like, because I was just, I was like, that's amazing, and
Yeah.
so I started thinking to myself, okay, how can I do that? And so I started trying to create a plan. And look, I wasn't trying to do a marathon a day. That would have been like, I mean, I probably could have, but it would have been a hot mess. But so I wanted to, and to be honest, actually, you know what? I don't know if I could have. It was such a daunting task to even think about doing a marathon a day. So the truth is, I don't know if I could have done it. But what I did try to do is like, let me see if I can run a half marathon a day.
Mm.
So what I did was I worked my way up to running 21K. So every day I would run. I started with 11K a day, and every week I'd increase it by a kilometer. So I would go
Okay.
11K, 12K, 13. So
Mhm.
every week. So it was about a 10-week process to get to the 21K a day. And then I got there, and I did 21K a day for a week. And now, for your listeners, I think maybe this could be an important piece, is that I was working full time in law enforcement. I'm a canine handler. I was running my dog, and I had a daughter, and I was going through divorce, and I was running a half marathon
Right.
a
That's a lot.
day.
That's a lot.